good evening. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Hilaal Live. My name is Faraz Patel. I'd like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us. And of course, my colleague Lukman Shadrack for taking you through that first part of the show. Now, the Constitutional Court has ordered the ANC to hand over their cadre deployment records to the Democratic Alliance. In addition, they must do so in 5 days, which started yesterday. The DA approached the court to force the ANC to share historical records of cadre deployment. Joining us now to unpack this, I'd like to welcome Neo Letswalo, who is a research associate, and PhD candidate at the University of Johannesburg's Politics Department. Neo, good day. Thank you so much for joining us here on Hilaal Live.
Good day, Mr. Patel. I hope I'm actually audible. Thanks for having me here.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. And Neo, please do call me Faraz. Mr. Patel, sounds a bit too formal and old. Neo, I just want to ask, is the ANC in a lot of trouble because of this?
Well, yes, it is indeed in a lot of trouble, especially if you consider the fact that, the appointment of public, the appointment of public officials, especially the political office barriers who were involved in the state capture. And now that the court has actually ruled that the ANC should provide the records, it will actually shows how the trajectory of the state capture was actually, visible. So I think that the Constitutional Court's judgment will actually expose a lot of how the machineries or mechanisms in which the state capture how it actually occurred.
Neo, the cadre deployment question has always been something that has supposedly haunted the ANC in terms of the opposition was gunning them for quite some time. When you read, obviously, the Concord judgment, it was quite compelling from the DA's perspective that they were actually able to look at this and say, look, there is something for the DA to work with. And it was quite telling, wasn't it, just how much of effort the DA really put into making sure that they can actually get those records from the ANC?
Yes, it is, because, considering the fact that the current president was the chairperson of the cadre deployment committee. And if you can look currently that we are also, approaching elections. So that is one of the modus operandi of campaigning, to actually expose that the president was directly involved in the shenanigans of cadre deployment, and also the appointment, and also played a crucial role in the state capture thereof. So I think that the ANC and the DA is precisely playing a campaigning role, especially that the judgment has actually came out before the election. So this is something that they can actually run with in terms of campaigning.
Neo, you spoke about, obviously, President Cyril Ramaphosa being the chairperson of the cadre deployment. Now, that very same committee was meant to, of course, have the sense of integrity and merit,
Yes.
but there's always been that question mark with regards to that because of just the way this was done, just the way these employments were done. That again puts a question mark, given also that he was part of the war room dealing with the energy crisis, and we're still having an energy crisis right now in the country. So, bit of a question mark on President Cyril Ramaphosa, isn't it, with regards to this judgment that came from the Concord?
Yes, it is, because, cadre deployment, I think it's something that is procedural in all political parties. I mean, the CIC of Economic Freedom Fighter once actually conveyed during an interview with JJ Tawa to say that, when the public will actually scrutinize the government, they will say the ANC-led government, but they need to be scrutinized by the fact that they actually employed people that they would entrust to drive the mandate of the organization. So a party-led government is something that, it must actually appoint people that it entrust. But however, now, the difference is that he actually advocated for the meritocracy to be involved. So I think that the most important element that was actually lacking is the issue of having people who have the capable skills to actually execute the mandate that was given into a particular position. So that is something that we actually missed in the ANC most of the time. Even if you can take a look in the cabinet, most of the people who are actually currently having strategic portfolios, they don't actually qualify or actually speaks directly to what they have actually experienced or qualified to be holding such, important portfolios in the country. And also currently having the energy crisis, I believe that the transference of appointing, Minister Kositsibe Sputla Ramukopa is one of the strategic causes, also an engineer. So now we saw a drift in terms of appointment. There was approximation in terms of actually matching the skills in the portfolio, and hence why the explanation when interviewed is something that is important. But if you can look historically, the CEOs of ESCOMs, people who actually didn't have necessarily or were in the engineering fraternity. So the previous was a lawyer. So this actually shows that there was actually a misalignment in terms of deployment of ministers or portfolio holders of a specific administration.
Neo, during the time of the late President Nelson Mandela, cadre deployment was, of course, seen as this invention that was supposed to reward many people, of course, who had missed out due to apartheid and colonialism. And I think it came to a lot of people that this should have worked much better. We saw it obviously collapsing during, post Polokwane conference, where it just went spiraling out of control. Can cadre deployment actually be fixed? Can it go back to those golden eras of the mid-90s, or is it just something that needs to be squashed, taken away, and maybe revisited in another form?
Yes, like I said, the most important part about public scrutiny, when it reflects back, it says the ANC-led government. So it is important that a party employs people that it actually entrusts, not necessarily loyalists to it, but people who qualify to execute the mandate that is actually given. So what I will actually advise, or what I will actually say, is that it is possible that we can actually take it back to the golden days of the pre-Polokwane conference. But the most important that is we need to include educated and people who have the capacity in terms of qualification to actually execute the particular mandate. So if we can just align between education level and also a type of portfolio, a type of responsibility that a person or a candidate has to assume, an appointee has to assume. So one of the divergent, or one of the the missing middles between cadre deployment currently is that it only takes people who are loyal. It only takes people who have been in the struggle, and also it only takes people who don't necessarily know anything about the execution of a particular portfolio. So hence why most of the time we actually lack understanding. And also if we can also see what actually happened previously with the and it becomes more problematic when it's not necessarily office political barriers, but also administrators are also part of the deployment scheme or committee. So political office barriers, we know that they represent the party, being MECs and ministers. But now, when it actually comes to affect the executors of a particular policy, meaning the directors within the state institutions are becoming now more inclined to political connection, then it becomes an issue, because now we cannot separate between politics and administrative dichotomy, which is the most important part. So administrators are meant to be administrators, people who are qualified to execute the job, although political office barriers are not necessarily experts in a particular field, but they play an important role in terms of driving the vision and the mission of a particular department. So now we see that the whole, both administration and political offices are being appointed in line with the party, in line of being a party loyalist. So that is when it becomes very problematic, because this particular behavior actually fuels corruption. People now started to execute the mandate of a political party than of the government, of which is service delivery.
Neo, so yesterday during the ANC Gauteng Lekgotla, of course, the ANC Gauteng chairperson Panyaza Lesufi said this is just the DA trying to use electioneering tactics, and it's a hollow judgment. And of course, they have the right to go ahead and reply to it. But looking at that judgment, is there any way back for the ANC? Because it just seems right now that their backs are truly against the wall with this.
Yes, it is. I don't think there's any way that the ANC can actually retaliate this, unlike just giving political sentiments like this is just the campaigning tool that the DA is actually, using. But the most important part is that it is and is going to actually impact the upcoming elections because of once they have issued out the records and it shows on how the procedures of cadre deployment was actually manifested. It's going to expose the ANC corruption and also how many departments and how service delivery was actually impacted as a result of one. So most South Africans are going to see the core of the problem, since the record are going to provide a diagnosis of where the issue of poor service delivery and the issue of corruption actually comes from, as it actually shows the proceedings of these particular appointees that were given a responsibility that is bigger to them. So I think that they can use it as the ANC can actually use it as a political tool that the DA is actually currently moving with. But importantly is that even if it is, then it's going to also impact. But most importantly is that it also strengthens the cornerstones of democracy in terms of the promotion of access to information, because I think personally that the public needs to know on how the transparency of appointment actually happened, and as soon as we can diagnose the issue on the core in terms of why did we have or why have we actually experienced a lot of poor service deliveries, and then if it wasn't an issue, a challenge of political office, because not only the political office can be necessarily corrupt, but also administration. So lack of implementation can happen as a result of administrative backlogs or bureaucratic red tapes that might happen internally. But if we can actually see the records that the people who were actually appointed are people who didn't have necessarily the skill or the capacity to execute this particular responsibility.
Neo, thank you so much for joining us here on Hilaal Live. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
That's Neo Letswalo, a research associate and PhD candidate at the University of Johannesburg's Politics Department. After the break, I'll have you latest in news, finance, and sports. Do stay tuned.